Because if you simply say that sodium, what's the configuration of sodium right? Right? It's 1s2, 1s2, 2s2, 2p6, 3s1. So an S1 configuration falls right in the first group, therefore I know it's an S1 configuration. Now what can happen? After sodium is not a one electron system, and therefore if sodium is not a one electron system, 3s and 3p will not be degenerate, so they will be split. So let's say I split. So if I'm simply going to say that the electron is going to jump from here to here, and then back again, and then it jumps back from 3p to 3s, I get my line. How many lines must you get? One line. Because p going to n is one line. And therefore, if you take the sodium lamp, put it into a monochromator, and see what you get, you expect to see one line, but actually you will see a doublet. And you see two lines very closely spaced. Or if you look at it in the spectrum map, it looks like how many lines? You see two lines in there, and that's perturbing because you only expect to see one, which should be the 3p to 3s transition. That's it. But actually, you see two lines. But you can explain it in terms of term symbols if you can figure it out. Because what happens for this S state? What is the term symbol for this? Doublet S. No question about that. And in doublet S, 1/2. What's the configuration for this? This is one electron from S has gone to P. The rest of the electrons are still sitting where they are. So it is still 1s2, 2s2, 2p6. Instead of 3s1, it is now 3p1 in this excited state. And if it is 3p1 in the excited state, so it means that it is go to that's basically what has happened. The s electron from 3s has now become a p electron into a 3p orbital, and if that is the case, it should return to the 3s level after the excitation has been done, and therefore what you should be getting is this one line. You get two lines. Go back to the term symbol that you have studied. This is going to give me a doublet S 1/2 level. What is this going to give me? Doublet S, doublet P, but then there are two J doublets in there. There is a doublet P 3/2 and a doublet P 1/2. But this is not really one line. And which is the lower energy state here? It has to be the 1/2 state because it is less than half full. Therefore, it must be a doublet P 1/2. Now, when the curve jumps down, without going into selection rules, I have not taught you yet. Let's assume that it can jump from here and it can jump from here. Because of the fact you have a split in the P level as doublet P 1/2 and doublet P 3/2, quite naturally, when this electron returns, there must be two transitions very close to each other. And how much spaced apart are they going to be? They're going to be spaced apart as much as these two states have been split. And that's the reason why you see two lines, and this difference in energy between these two, if you can actually measure them, which you can, is actually telling you the difference between the doublet P 3/2 and the doublet P 1/2 state in sodium. And that is the reason why you get a doublet in the sodium spectrum. And not just one line, which is what you would have expected to get if you had simply that sort of a picture. But that is not the picture you should be looking at. You should be looking at a picture in which there is a coupling of the orbital angular momentum and the spin angular momentum to give you J. And there are two J's that you are dealing with. J equals 3/2 and J equals 1/2. We will see more complicated systems later on, but I just gave you this just to impress upon you that it is absolutely essential to be able to look at electron configurations, not simply as electron configurations, but in terms of term states. Because only if you have them in your mind, in terms of term states, that you're going to be able to explain such phenomena. In fact, if you went back to history, and before you even go back to history, when you solve your Schrodinger equation for your hydrogen atom, what are the quantum numbers you get? You get n. Mind you, there are three parts to the function, right? When you write your wave function, it's in terms of r, in terms of theta, in terms of phi. The two angles and one length that you really have used in solving your Schrodinger equation. And quantization or boundary conditions on each of these will each give you a quantum number. I think I mentioned this a long time ago, that where does the quantum number actually come from? The quantum number actually comes from the boundary conditions that you are implying on your problem. The moment you confine the system to a certain region, out jumps the quantum number. Particle in a box. You say that electron or whatever particle there is, the function has to go to 0 at one end, it has to go to 0 at the other end. Moment you say 0 at one end, half the equation is lost. Moment you say it has to go to 0 at the second end, n pi shows up and your quantum number will show up. And that is something you've got to look at. Every time you solve the Schrodinger equation, you've got to be alert to the fact, where is my quantum number actually generated? Where is it born? It is born in one step. And that one step will always be a quantization step. It will always be a boundary condition step. So if I apply a boundary condition on R, I get a quantum number. I apply a boundary condition on theta, I get a quantum number. And on phi, I get a quantum number. And what are the quantum numbers you get when you do this problem? You get n, L, and m. Spin was never there. And people at one point in time thought that's it. N, L, and m will suffice until some girl did the experiment and found we're getting doublets like this. We're getting doublets like this. You can't explain this. If I don't talk about the spin, I can't explain this doublet. Spin has to be there. And therefore, as a result of Stern-Gerlach's experiment, they said, now look, there must be something intrinsically going on in this problem. There must be an intrinsic angular momentum that Schrodinger equation has still not given us. Spin was therefore introduced ad hoc as an ad hoc quantum number. So I put it in there and explain the spectrum. Of course, later on when you go back and look at it, today if you do a relativistic quantum mechanics, spin falls off. That's a very natural consequence. But if you do the quantum mechanics the way Schrodinger taught us to do, to solve this equation, spin is not there. Spin was introduced later. But the fact that spin was required is simply because you have to be able to look at spin and the orbital angular momentum, get your J, get the split, and then explain the doublet. So the point I'm really trying to drive home at this point, at this time, is the following: that you have to be able to write term states for all these configurations as easily as possible. Without term states, none of these spectra can ever get assigned. Because with just lines like this, 3s and 3p, you are sunk. You will not be able to explain any of the splittings that you see in spectroscopy. So this is something that we will come back and visit over and over again. We will look at spectra for more complicated situations than sodium. Sodium is one of the simplest situations. But I mentioned sodium right at the beginning, even before I went into selection rules, essentially to tell you that you have to get your term state picture quite clear. So it also means that I would really like you to go back and revisit what we did last semester on this term state and be ready with it as we go on. Now let's take the hydrogen problem and let's try to see what sort of a picture I will get. 1s, 2s, 3s, 2p is here, 3p is here. Okay. Now just like you have selection rules in rotation, and mind you, all these angular momentum selection rules, what was delta J going to be equal to? Plus minus 1. Of course, you will have delta J equal to 0 in certain situations. We never got into those situations. And I promise you I won't get into those situations at this point in time. In the next course on spectroscopy, we will see where these will pop up. But they will pop up. Delta J equal to 0, even in absorption. Delta J equal to 0 in Raman was more meaningful. And we went through that argument as to why it should be meaningful. But delta J equal to 0, at least for a diatomic, no. We really didn't see that. But then, with the polyatomic and nonlinear and all that, you start seeing these delta J equal to 0. And there's a reason, or there's a method and all that matters. But we will not get into that situation now. So you have this delta J equal to plus minus 1 as the more common selection rule that you have already come across for rotations. J is a rotational quantum number. What is L? It's also an elemental quantum number having to do with the angular momentum. So you can go back and derive the selection rule just as I said you can for the J values. And you can see how you can get delta J equal to plus minus 1 by solving the integral for the transition probabilities. Likewise, you can do for transition from one state to another and see what values of L will be allowed to change during the transition. And it will turn out that delta L must be plus minus 1, very similar to delta J equal to plus minus 1. Both are angular momentum stuff, mind. Therefore, it is not surprising that this is happening. What does delta L equal to plus minus 1 correlation will immediately tell me? If I start from S, where can I go? I have to go to a P. I can't go to 1s to 2s is not allowed. 1s to 2s cannot be allowed because 1s to 2s would be a delta L equal to a zero transition. No, not allowed. I have to go from 1s to 2p. There is no selection rule on N, and you would have seen that even in high school. Why? When you learned about your bracket fashion and fun series, because any n is going to the lowest n. Any n is going to n equal to 1, and you have each of these series. So right away, you sort of were intuitively led to believe, of course we never said that in so many words in school, there is no selection rule on n. Nobody bothers, nobody cares for what the n's are. You start from any n, you can go to any n. But you start from any l, you can't go to any l. You have to go only to the adjacent l. So if I start with an 1s, I can go into this transition, a 2p transition. Starting from 1s, where else can I go to? That's fine too. Because I can go from 1s to a 3p because n is not important. But what's important? The L changes are important. And by jumping from 1s to a 3p, I still respect the delta L equal to plus 1 correlation rule. I don't have to worry about n, and therefore it is perfectly fine. Which essentially means that I can start from here and go to any of these p levels, it's perfectly okay. But I have to go to a p level. I can't be jumping into ns. I can't be jumping into a d either. So if I go to a d, then I'm actually going to be jumping from s. If I try to do 1s to 3p, not allowed. N nobody cares, but then L people do care. Everybody, the system cares, the atoms care. Therefore, I can't go from S to D because that would involve a delta L equals 2. Not allowed. I can do this. If, however, I have an electron already sitting in, of course, the same rule applies to 2s. Starting from 2s, I can go to 3p, go to 4p, I can go to 4, 5p, and so on. Again, a delta L plus 1 selection rule is perfectly valid, perfectly allowed, and you will observe it. But how will you observe it? S to P transition will be a doublet for the very same reason. For the very same reason, if an electron jumps from an 1s level to a 2p level, I will actually see a doublet because the 1s level will be a doublet as 1/2 state, and the 2p level will be a doublet P 3/2 and 1/2, and therefore I will see a transition going from a doublet as 1/2 to a doublet P 3/2, doublet as 1/2 to a doublet as 3/2, doublet P 3/2. So that will be a doublet in all these cases. So anytime I am going to be looking at an S to P transition, it's perfectly allowed because delta L is plus minus 1. It's also going to give me a doublet because the P levels will actually be a combination or an assortment or collection of delta P 3/2 and a delta P 1/2 state. Therefore, I will be seeing transitions to both these levels. It will be a doublet. However, if I start from a 2p level and I want to get out, where can I get out to? Well, I can do this, delta L plus 1, but I can do this too. So that would be a delta L minus 1. What I want you to do is the following. If you start from here to here, what's the nature of your spectrum going to be? A doublet. Right? Because this will be doublet P 1/2 and 3/2. And this will be doublet as 1/2. Therefore, what is this transition going to look like? It will look like a doublet. I won't tell you what this is going to look like. You figure it out yourself and we will look at it on Monday. If I go from here to here, what are these transitions going to look like? This is going to be doublet P 3/2 and 1/2. What is this going to be? The D1 system. So what is L going to be in this case? 2. If L is 2, what is capital L? Also 2, there's only one electron. And if it's capital L, what state is that? A D state. One electron only. Because the spin has to be half. The spin is half, it must be doublet D. And if it's a doublet D, what should be the j values? It has to be 1/2 and a 3/2 and 5/2. So I have two of these. So now this is going to be WP 1/2 and WP 3/2 to be connected with WP 3/2 and WP 5/2. There are two states here and two states out there. And you must see how, in what ways you can connect them, how many ways you can connect them. So I'm cheating you because I haven't told you the selection rules on J yet. But you already started about selection rules of J to some extent. We have looked at least diatomics, homonuclear diatomics, heteronuclear diatomics, and so on. And we know what sort of selection rules there are depending on whether it is Raman or incorrect and so on. When we get back, we will look at the selection rules on J. And then, without even telling you the selection rules on J, I simply threw a surprise at you saying that this has to be a doublet. We will come back and look at the selection rules on J. But over there, it is not one state here and two states here. Two states here and two states here. And therefore, you're going to have possibilities, different combinations. And you should see how many combinations you will get. What does the spectrum look like? And as this complexity increases, you will see that the spectrum can actually be split into multiples. It won't even be a doublet, it could be a triplet, it could be a quartet. But all of it can be very efficiently, very effectively rationalized simply by understanding what the term states are for the initial state and the final state. We will stop here so that we can get in time for the lecture. So Monday, please get through your assignments. We will work out the assignments. So I want to do at least 2 tutorials for you, Monday and next Monday.